There's a reason I got on a plane and flew here instead of doing this via Zoom. When I text my wife, I love you, I love you, I love you, I can do that 100 times a day. It's when my body walks in the door, I see her across the room and I smile, and then her body goes, he's home, I'm safe.
That right there is how you bring passion back into a marriage. It's also fundamentally how you maintain a marriage for 50 years.
What to do when things go horribly wrong in your relationship.
Well, what's the point of your marriage? Like, what are you achieving together?
So do you have a prenup with your wife?
Do not.
So this man advocates for prenups.
Okay.
And I have a problem with that.
Teach me about it. Let's fight.
How can men step into their responsibilities in this world? Responsibilities to others and to their families, but also to themselves, and especially when they are facing intense conflict. How can men struggle with those emotions inside of themselves without letting them out and being overwhelmed by them or hurting other people with them during those conflicts? Today we're joined by John Delony, a man who excels in helping men master their emotions and especially their anxiety in this modern world. He talks to us extensively about his own marriage, about his family, and about his experience becoming a man who others can rely on.
All right, Adam, this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm really excited for it. Let's do this one. So I want to talk to both of you guys and really get into this idea of what to do when things go horribly wrong. And I've seen a lot of relationships end terribly. There's a lot of conversations online about, MGTOW, men going their own way, red pill, how the woman is going to come in and like utterly destroy your life. And truly, there's many parts of our society that are geared towards conflict. We're a very litigious culture. Everybody's always fighting and, just destroying each other online, offline, it's a mess. So what do you do, John, when things are going horribly in your relationship? What are some tactics? What are some strategies you can use to kind of find eternal peace first, but also start projecting that peace and helping to de-escalate tension?
I like that you use that word de-escalate. So whenever I find my relationships are going sideways, or when I find my work isn't what I want it to be, whatever, my relationship with my kids, whatever's going on, the first place I like to go is the mirror and say, what am I contributing to this, right? One of the earliest relational pieces of wisdom I ever received was never say you, right? When I sit down at a table and I'm upset with somebody, or my wife and I are having a disagreement, the moment I say, you fill in the blank, you never show up, you're doing this, you've been ignoring me, I just started a fight, and she has to wall up and defend herself, right? And so when I sit down and say the scary, hard, and I would argue the braver, more masculine thing to do would be to sit down and say, I'm feeling this. I need this. That's way scarier than flexing and projecting, right? It's hard to say.
Men have feelings?
That's the rumor, right? That's the rumor. And so I always want to go to the mirror first. And then I have developed over the years, actually it was, we were talking at dinner last night, it was martial arts training. I was a big loudmouth hothead dude who was always running my mouth, always, yeah. And it wasn't until I spent several years really getting after it with professionals that I realized.
What'd you train?
Do what?
What did you train in?
Oh, everything from, it was right as mixed martial arts was coming on live, right? So it was a jiu-jitsu gym and a kickboxing gym, and that everybody started coming together, right? But I learned, I'm just going to go home. It's never worth it. It's not worth it, right? And so what learning how to compete and what learning how to defend yourself taught me was go home. Yeah. Like my ego and my honor and my love isn't going home and having a peaceful evening. And so the hills I will die on have gotten fewer and fewer and fewer.
But they still remain, though.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the hills you die on?
Some defending the least of these. Those who are who don't have a voice, or those who are being stepped on. I think I've got a responsibility to speak where somebody can't speak. A hill I will die on is the safety and integrity of my family, right? The safety and integrity of my ability to practice my faith as I would like to, And so those are a few of the hills, but there's just fewer and fewer and fewer of them.
So what's interesting there is you've swapped from defending yourself endlessly, which generates more conflict with the people you love, to defending the people that you love, even from yourself, even from your own arrogance.
Of course, that's right. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, there's an old punk rock line: "You're only going to die from your own arrogance, man." Like, what's the point? What's the point? And once I became, to use one of your words, once I became more and more secure in my relationship with my wife, my relationship with myself, my relationship with God, once I became more secure, then the other stuff became window dressing. Then the other stuff actually I could hold really loosely. And interestingly, that's made me better at work. That's made me a better husband. It's made me a better dad, right? It's made me a better citizen, better community member.
I was talking to one of my coaching clients just this morning, and I'll protect his privacy as I always do, but he was talking to me. He has multiple kids with his wife, but he's never fixed his avoidant attachment. He's a hard driving kind of guy, but he never understood his own needs, and he never understood why he needed control over everything. And it wasn't until he reached a point where he found himself cheating on his wife, not accidentally, but he realized what he was doing. And he said, "I can't believe I'm doing this to my family." That he turned around and said, "I myself am the biggest threat to my family." So when he started taking control, like you just did there, like you talked about, it became not how do I defend myself, even from my family, how do I defend my family from myself? And the answer was exactly like there, to become more secure, to find that place where he is right with himself and is not fighting that endless battle that's not even really needing to be fought.
But I think going back, you're talking about the red pill conversation, I think the illusion is you find security in holding things more tightly.
Yes, control.
And I have found infinitely more security in not holding it, but anchoring into bedrock and then letting go, man.
And this is a good conversation to have, right? Actually, by controlling too many things, we're creating a danger within ourselves. And this is a key contribution to stress, confrontation. Not only will you be causing more arguments and you'll be partaking more arguments, but you'll also be damaging yourself internally. People get sick, people get cancer, people do all these things, and they get sick because, and many times, they assemble too much power within themselves. So the theme of our podcast is things that we wish people knew. What is the one thing that you wish people knew about themselves in the way they handle stress, anxiety, and conflict?
Man, I wish people were able to see through the fog of the current cultural milieu, which is your body's somehow broken. Something's wrong with you. And the way I teach on anxiety is, man, it's just simply your body trying to get your attention, that it has identified in your environment that you're probably not safe. Or maybe one time you weren't safe. You are now, but when you were a kid in the same situation, you weren't safe. And it just sounds the alarm. And when we feel that discomfort, when we feel those alarms go off, the culture says, if you feel bad or you feel discomfort, there's some pathology there. Something's wrong.
Medicate.
Let's duct tape over it.
Yep.
Or there's an endless amount of distraction / addictions to basically go into your kitchen and your smoke alarm's going off and you just duct tape a pillow around it. You just, it does make it
I've done that once.
I have too, right? It makes it quieter, but your house is going to burn down because you didn't deal with a fire, right? And so I wish people knew that on the whole, your body's trying to get your attention. And it may mean, here's what we don't do good in our culture, because we tell everybody, you just follow your passion, whatever that nonsense means. You go do whatever you want to do. And if you're uncomfortable, if it burns your relationships, well, that one just ran its course. Pick a new one. And if she won't love you, well, then she's not good for you. You got to go find someone else. And everything becomes very disposable. Everything becomes about moving and moving and moving. And for me, I was on, like when I started I started as a dean of students, as a professor. And within the first year, it was one of those, oh, you're going to be a college president someday. You're going to run this. And I was like, that's right. 26, loudmouth, arrogant idiot. But like, you're going to, yeah. And it wasn't until I spent the next decade working side by side with presidents that I realized I don't want that life. I'm not wired for that job. Right? I'm not wired to be on 24/7, 365. I'm not wired to not see my family and my kids with that. Some people are. I'm not. My body would have tried to get my attention until, like as you mentioned, until my life was just a basket of chaos and stress. And so it was a hard reckoning. I had to grieve this picture this desire that I thought I wanted. right? I had to look at it and say, this is not for me. I have to let it go. And what we were trained to do now is to try to get the world to bend to us, and it doesn't. Nature is nature is nature.
Blame, right?
Right, or just to poke. If y'all were to do this, then I could have. It's not for me, and that's okay. But we have to have a culture that reckons with that.
I worked for years with this genius named Kip, and one thing he hammered into my head during my formation years in therapy, as a therapist, not doing therapy. One thing he hammered into my head was that pain is information.
It's data. Yeah.
Right. People run away from it. Here in America, we've made a new cult out of avoiding pain and chasing pleasure. Pleasure is our God. Pain is the devil. And you're endlessly pulled between those two things. But his data point to me was pain is just information. If you're in pain, it means there's something wrong, which means you have receptors to tell you something's wrong. So there's something that's right. Go find the thing that's right where you're not in pain anymore.
Yeah. And I think... maybe I'm naive. I don't think we got there on purpose. I think we had a horse, and some guy was like, I want to get there faster, and he created a car. And then that car had a wooden bench seat, and someone was like, man, I'll put a cushion on that. And then 100 years later, there's leather seats, and they're warm, right? And suddenly, if the warmer on your seat goes out, it's an injustice. It's a disaster, right? And so we've created a world where every uncomfortable thing is something to be solved. And we've created a world, man, I'm really grateful for air conditioning and for my car having an air conditioner heater, for this room being air conditioned. And all of a sudden, now I live a 72-degree life. I go from a house to a car to an office to a car back to a house. I work out indoor. I've put my body in a very unnatural planet, right? In a very unnatural environment. And it's killing it, right? So I think that not being in pain is good, but I also have to recognize that I'm missing out on a whole bunch of data that is trying to keep me safe and keep me alive.
Well, and then the question becomes, okay, you're in pain, you're uncomfortable. Is there a better state? Maybe that actually is the best state. Maybe you're just temporarily uncomfortable. It's just sensory data. It's like our emotions.
Or I'm on a path, right? Yeah, I'm going to continue to walk through it. That was the wildest thing studying for my latest book about anxiety was Dr. Brewer out of Yale. The way the mind works is if you're anxious about something, it gets your alarms to avoid. Let's say I get really anxious about podcasting, right? My body makes me anxious. If I just say no to all podcast invitations, so I'm not anxious, it actually reinforces. My body gets what it wanted, which is me to avoid the opportunity of messing up publicly and getting embarrassed. So I don't do the podcast. I say no, and my body goes, oh, that kept us safe. It makes the anxiety response, it makes that stress response stronger. The only path is right through it, is I'm going to do podcast after podcast after podcast and teach my body, I'm okay. Yeah, you're going to say something dumb and someone's going to comment on it, and then your wife's still going to love you.
That is exactly how agoraphobia forms. When somebody has trauma, then their world is scary, so they pull in. Then their world is scary, so they pull in. And eventually they're stuck in their home. They can't even leave their home to go grocery shopping because something horrible happened to them 10 years ago, and they've given in to the fear. It swallows you.
So let's talk about relationship for a second. So one of the biggest sources of anxieties nowadays is the loneliness, right? People are terrified of feeling lonely, of being alone, and we're not alone ever anymore. As soon as you wake up, you reach over to your nightstand and you pull out your phone. You're no longer alone. There's people in front of you, there's entertainment, there's whatever you want is available. And first of all, that is now damaging relationships because people now can't even decipher when they're alone versus not alone. They have no time to process. And if they feel a break in connection, especially with their partner, especially with somebody who's close to them, it is completely terrifying. They don't understand or process these feelings. Now, a lot of this has to do with their attachment, as I understand, Adam. Can you tell us a little bit more about loneliness, attachment, and anxiety as a connection?
Can I pop in real quick before you answer that? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
I would interject that the phone, the digital communication is poured gasoline on our loneliness. Crisis.
Why?
Because I think it is a cheap digital substitute, and I think we
love supplements, man.
I do. We've tried to digitally replicate an in-person experience. There's a reason I got on a plane and flew here instead of doing this via Zoom. When I text my wife, I love you, I love you, I love you, I can do that 100 times a day. All I'm giving her is data.
Right.
It's when my body walks in the door and she sees my eye crinkles and I see her across the room and I smile and my shoulders drop and I make an obnoxious gesture like, let's hug. Then her body goes, he's home, I'm safe, right? You can be pathologically, dangerously lonely in a crowded room. You can be dangerously lonely with 1 million followers on social media. You have to do the hard work of being in the room with other people. And I think that grabbing that phone has given us a false sense of proxy that look how unlonely I am, and our bodies are dying from the inside out.
And this is so true because the research shows in 2007 that when the iPhone was introduced to the market, teen depression rates skyrocketed out of control, but they were more connected than ever. But what was happening was they were texting so much that they weren't physically connecting with each other. So their serotonin levels plunged. Serotonin, when your wife sees your eye crinkles, right? I come home, I open my door, and I yell, "Snuggle bunny," to my wife because it's obnoxious. We've done that for 15 years. And she goes, "What?" And she jumps on me, we hug. But I can text her, again, like 100 times a day. That's dopamine. Right. I'm giving her dopamine hits, but I'm not giving her the serotonin. I'm giving her a pixie stick full of sugar, but I'm not feeding her that burger, that steak, right? That meal that keeps you sated. The research shows that. And to your question with attachment, when we have attachment issues, we don't usually have adequate oxytocin bonding with other people, adequate serotonin levels with relationships and conversations. We avoid the intimate conversations that would feed us serotonin. So we're starved on that. No wonder we're depressed, but we are chasing dopamine all the time anyway. So when we grab the phone, most people today can't tell the difference between an in-person conversation and a phone text. They can't tell it because they haven't experienced the proper brain chemistry because of the attachment issues.
And then how much conflict stems from that? We started a conversation on conflict and these really extreme points of confrontation. In many cases, I feel that loneliness sparks conflict because just as anxiety comes out as a sign that there's something wrong, anger, aggression, fear, all of these are also messaging. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a decoupling of language from the person who spoke it. We talked about this last night at dinner. For everyone listening to this, for all of human history, to hear a conversation between the three of us, you'd have to be sitting right there. Right? And there'd be a fire here and we'd be sitting around a fire talking and you'd be able to hear and absorb this information. Well, now you're hearing it divorced from us. And so if I don't know how you vote and I really don't want to know, but let's pretend we were polar opposite. Sure. And we're eating an incredible meal last night and you're like, I'm voting for this guy. I would go, that's ridiculous. Pass the salad, right? And we'd be sitting at a table having that interaction. And my body would know I'm safe. Now, and by the way, when my body is anchored in and I know I'm safe, that allows me to rappel off the edge and have all kind of wild intellectual battles and conversations. That's what I miss about the working in the academy. It was a bunch of people who studied one thing for 25 years, sitting around having lunch together, arguing. It was amazing. And we all worked for the same place. And we all took our kids to the same elementary school. So it was awesome. It's when you divorce the person from this idea and then you begin a process of slow dehumanization. And all great major conflicts throughout human history have started with some zeitgeist of dehumanizing people. They're vermin, they're cockroach, right? It starts this slow, they're not people, and now we can do horrible, awful things to them. I think that's what this digitization of the discourse has allowed us to do.
So true. The othering of them. You are not of me, so you are therefore going to be destroyed.
Right. And when someone's eating, that's the beauty of the Lord's Supper in Christian traditions, is I don't care how much money you have. I don't care if you're homeless. I don't care what your vote. Everybody's got to eat. So it forces everybody back. And in a society that has sanitized everything, we don't... I'm trying to think of a kind way to say this. We go to the powder room, right? We go to the bathroom. I didn't take a bath in there. There's no shower in there, but I just went to the bathroom, right? We have sanitized the things that make us human. We have whitewashed it all. And the last thing we got is we all got to eat. And we all get stuff in our teeth. And we all have little bits of spittle that come out. And so that's the beauty of it. Everybody's forced back to this thing. And it makes us human again.
Well, even that, the brain chemistry from eating, right? You and I had a great meal last night. We're eating, we're putting serotonin into our bodies. Oh, it feels so good to eat. You are more likely to have a positive outlook on the other person because you're eating. Yeah. And it feels good, but then you have conversation. You're smiling at each other. You're eating. Hey, how's that food? Oh, it's pretty good. Oh, you're going to vote for the other guy? Well, that's pretty stupid, but you know what? I still like it. So for some reason, I still like you.
Sure.
And you're eating and you're enjoying it.
And you're actually supplementing these hard conversations with food, because as you're eating, you're generating serotonin, you're getting the sugar spikes. They're helping you kind of step over these gaps that before you might have actually fallen into and gotten upset. And, now your brain's busy. Like it's too happy to be angry, right? And that's another big part about the tradition, right? One of the things we're doing with your events is that communal meals are a big portion of Adam's retreats and events going forward, so that people can have this bonding experience over a place that is safe. With my daughter and I, we actually have the best conversations over dinner. Over dinner, we sit down and either her and I and my girlfriend will talk about something that's connected to religion or spirituality, or she will bring one of her stuffed animals, and we will have to communally explain to the stuffed animal why, he's supposed to be good. Simba is her favorite stuffed animal. Why Simba is supposed to be good and what it's like and what it means. And it is exactly that building of that community. So it really does seem to me that the reconnecting to our actual humanity, our bodies, hugging, touching, eating, sleeping, being close to each other is key to creating a conflict-proof system.
I have a hypothesis that we've extracted human touch so much from our culture. I remember a decade ago, I was at an HR training for a university where I worked. And I'll never forget the HR person, who was a great person, just doing their job, but recommended, as the university, we recommend the air high five. And I said, what? They said, if something's good, it's an air high five so as to avoid any sort of confusion or negative impact one way or the other. And I remember thinking, we are taking away piece by piece the things that make us human, because there are evil actors out there. There's gross creeps that we should be able to fire and get rid of, and you can't be here if that's who you are, if you're going to use somebody else for your gratification. But because we have created systems where we can't get rid of people for those type of things, we have just created this overly separate, sanitized world, and I think our bodies are starving from it.
So there's two things that I see absolutely killing men and families and kids at the same time. Think of how little physical contact most men get. If you're not married, if you don't have kids, you probably don't have much physical contact with any human being on the planet, ever. Now, physical contact is so incredibly important for your oxytocin, for your GABA, for your serotonin. We keep going back to serotonin, but it's such a crucial driver of the brain chemistry. But men are starved for touch. Now, when are we allowed to touch? Only during physical intercourse. Right. Only during that. So no wonder Tinder is exploding, and no wonder guys will hire professionals. But you know what professionals often do is not that. It's usually touch. It's usually snuggling even. Guys are hiring professionals
huge
for
part
that
of the
now.
culture in Asia. Like in Japan, there's literally girlfriend experiences, non-sexual, nothing, but they literally will sit there with you, talk to you, hold your hand, all of that. They'll literally buy serotonin.
But men are number one starved for that, and we have now learned that the only time we can have touch is that. It's just like the only time we can have emotions is when we're angry. Those are our two outlets. But the second thing is this: family dinners. You touched on that with your daughter, but family dinners, sitting around eating as a family, that has gone away in the last 20 to 30 years as well.
As a de-escalation technique, right? There are a lot of this stuff about conflict, marital conflict. You have to have these preventative measures, right? Just as you go to the gym, just as you go to church, as you go and do these routines that you can do with your family to build serotonin connection will be largely preventing the mental disorder and, the connection disease of conflict that is going to come.
Well, let's talk about the brain chemistry real quick. When you have oxytocin, then you get GABA. And when you have GABA, what does it do? Well, it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter that suppresses future expressions of cortisol. So when you feel loved and connected, then you have this thing that stops you from feeling stressed again in the future. You spiral up. But when you lose that, or if you never get it, you spiral down into the pit, and there's nothing that's going to pull you out. We medicate it, but we're not medicating it with oxytocin or love. We're medicating it with throw some chemicals at it.
So 4 years ago, I started working where I work, and the CEO, his son worked there, and the son has recently been promoted to president of the company, and it's a giant family business, and they're slowly starting the transition. As I've gotten to know his son over the years, he's an extraordinarily wise young man. and he married an amazing, brilliant woman. He's a good dad. And I thought, I want my kid to be like that. And so I started watching for these interactions. And one of the things I noticed early on was every Tuesday morning, there's a big cafeteria on the campus where I work. Every Tuesday morning, I would get there and they were over there eating. So I thought, all right. And so I started taking my son, who was just walking into 6th grade at the time. He's about to leave 8th grade now. Every Tuesday morning for the last 3+ years, we've gone to Waffle House, which is not the bastion of health, right? But we eat every Tuesday morning. And at first it was, I wanted to like have all these life lessons. I'm going to teach you that. I quickly learned a 6th grader at 6:45 in the morning can't absorb any life lessons. He just wants a waffle, right? Or his grits bowl or whatever he gets. But what I learned is you just keep showing up and you just keep showing up. And then at the end of 6th grade was, hey, Dad, why does God, and now we're in it.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of 7th grade, hey, Dad, I think I like so-and-so. What is that? And now we're in it. And it was this never stop showing up. And what I realized, and by the way, I'm really pathological about not letting him have he doesn't walk around the world with a smartphone. I'm not giving a 14-year-old a smartphone. And I know that the comments on your show just went, right. But this is the best high five I've received as a dad so far. Was recently he was frustrated that I wouldn't let him be a part of something with the electronics. And I said, just tell your friends your dad's an idiot and he's a jerk and he's just trying to ruin your life. And in his 14-year-old rage, he said, I can't say that because it's not true. And I thought, yes. But here's the deal. That didn't come from a lecture. That came from, as you're talking about the family meal, it came from 3+ years of building a foundation that he is slowly anchoring so deeply into concrete. And now when the world shoves him, he'll fall off the bridge, but he knows my dad's a safe place. My dad gave me the most precious resource of his life, which was his time. My dad, when he starts to learn about business and how the world works, he'll realize, oh, my dad skipped work trips. My dad, because he was there for me, not in my son rules the world, but because I care about this guy, I'm raising a young man. And we don't talk enough about, and I think it's a tragedy, the psychological community knows the research about financially, psychologically, emotionally, relationally, you're better if you have a faith practice. The psychology community knows the data on families who have dinner together and the outcomes for the kids. The psychological community knows about the outcomes of a 2-parent home on kids versus, they know that, they just don't want to say it. And so they get right up to the edge and they just stop. And we have to be honest. If a family says, what's one thing I can do to help my kids? Have dinner every night. Just have dinner together, man, and turn the stupid TVs off. And is it awkward? Yes. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up.
One of the easiest transformations that I help families make when they would come to me with when I worked in a clinic, they would come to me with these angry teenagers, teenagers with addictions, teenagers with risky behaviors and things, and they couldn't connect to their parents. One of the easiest transitions was to tell the father, look, sit for 10 minutes every day, 10 minutes with your kid. Ask them questions. That's it. Don't lecture them. Don't teach them. Don't poke them. Ask them questions and be curious about them. And they'd say, they'll never answer my questions. And I said, 3 weeks. 3 weeks when you have an angry teenager, spend every day for 10 minutes, explain what you're going to do. 3 weeks of asking them questions. Please just do it. And they say, yeah, all right, Adam. And they go try it. And they'd come back 3 weeks later and say, they're talking to me. They haven't been angry. I've learned so much about them. I can't even believe the transformation in 3 weeks from fathers. Just 10 minutes a day with your father is incredible.
Yeah, I started a practice of, and it was after reading about neurotransmitters in the face. Yeah. When my son was little, I would just start spending 10 to 30 seconds a day with my hands on his face. And he'd be like, oh, Dad, so... And then he would come in, right? And then my daughter. And so there's this idea of just touching your kids, right? Whether it's on the back of the neck, whether it's on the face. And another thing, let me get your opinions on this, guys. My wife was Dr. Delony way before me. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman. One morning, I was struggling with connecting with my daughter. And this has been ongoing for a long time. And she said, what if instead of focusing on being right all the time, you focused on being likable? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, every time kids come in, it's like, why are you wearing that? Fix your shorts, turn your shirt around, fix your shoes. And my son would say, man, something about the Cretaceous period, whatever. I don't even know about it. And I would start being like, well, Ash. And And she said, nobody wants to be around that guy. You wouldn't want to be around that guy. And so I sat down with my son. He was in 6th or 7th grade at the time. And I said, hey, I am turning you over to the middle school wolves. I'm not going to comment on your clothes anymore unless we're going to something for me. I love you. And so then when he came in, I started saying things like, good morning, man. How's it going? And I didn't take every moment to turn into some sort of life lecture, some sort of me on a stage having to pontificate to my kid. I just started trying to connect with him. And it has been transformational. I don't know what happens downstream, and I still hold him accountable and all that. But this idea of I'm going to be a safer place, not a right place. And it's been transformative.
Well, society has changed. Our role as fathers in society has changed because they simply have nowhere else to get this. There's no extended family.
That's exactly
when I was growing
right,
up in Europe, my grandma would be like, "Oh, you look so cool, this and this and this," and then my aunt or whatever, like they would give us this positive reinforcement, and the dad would have to come in. Then my dad was busy and working whatnot, and he could lay down the law, he can show the more masculine aspects. We've cut all of that out.
Right.
Even in many cases, the women in our life, the mothers in our life, are working. They're not there to give them that. Schools don't give them that. There's nobody to give them that. So we now have to wear multiple hats. Right. And where before we would be playing into our absolute top masculine roles, I found myself having to do a lot of things that I never expected as a dad. There's a lot of teasing, there's a lot of comforting, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of accepting that I'm wrong, there's a lot of stuff I don't care for. I don't care about freaking, tea parties and, whatever else, but you have to show up in a particular way. So my daughter has now this game, and I talked about it a few times on the show because it's still perplexing to me, and she plays the bunny cave. I have to sit under the blankets with her and pretend that the wolf was trying to get all her stuffed animals and she has to go out and fight him and win, and there's this communal aspect of and whatnot. We've been doing this for a year. I'm so tired of the bunny cave, but I will continue doing it because to her that is showing up. That's right. And it is simply a proof to a child that there can be a circumstance, an arrangement, which is good for them on their terms, at their level, right? And that will foster that belief that, as you said, it's an anchor that you do not have to be alone. What does that do, and how does that go about, Adam, from psychology?
Your story about not wanting to play the game, I don't know why my kids have invented this game. Same idea. They call it Daddy Seahorse. I have no idea. I apparently lay on the floor and they all run around chanting Daddy Seahorse, and then they jump on my back.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means. We've been doing it for 4 months, and we just play and wrestle. And when at the end of the day, when I tuck them in bed, I say, "Hey, what was your favorite part of the day?"
Always.
Oh, it's always Daddy Seahorse. I'm like, why? Yeah. They're like, because it's fun. I'm like, no, but specifically why? Like, tell me really. But there's so much, their brain chemistry is so flooded so that when they go out and face a challenge, their brain chemistry is now resilient because of their time with me. Later, if they get hurt, their brain chemistry is resilient because of their time with me. If they face something that they're uncertain about, they come and ask me about it because now I'm safe, right? They bonded with me, so they have the permission to ask me questions instead of saying, he'll never help me.
You know what helped me understand this? In many ways, this is actually how I forged my relationship with God as well, right? Because to him, everything I'm doing is just ridiculously stupid. It's just like, it's just why? You could be doing something that's much more spiritually growing, but there you are running around with your absolute minuscule nonsense. But he still partakes with me in these conversations and discussions. He's there for me when I actually need him in the way that I need him.
That's a great picture.
When I'm coming to him, right? I don't come to him all the time, I go completely zoned out and I'm playing my own little game, but when I need him, Dad's always there. In many ways, we're actually training that to our kids. We're actually allowing them to build this connection, not just with themselves and their partners and their kids in the future, but also with God and with divinity, with themselves. That is going to be comforting in times of need.
And can we just say this out loud? All three of us are dads. It's real boring sometimes.
Yes.
It's miserable.
Yep.
And it is the last thing we want to do on the planet. And I think going back to what we talked about earlier, we're so obsessed with avoiding discomfort that we will cash out those moments, the dragon versus the rabbit thing. I remember my daughter, when she was younger, explaining to me about this wolf dragon thing. And I'm a pretty smart guy. I mean, I'm not super smart. I'm not like you, but I got 2 PhDs. I'm pretty smart. I had I couldn't understand what she was talking about. And I remember thinking, just sit here and nod and be as present as you
like
possibly can. That's it, man. I mean, but I think dads get bored on the 10th kick with a soccer ball, and that stupid phone is way more engaging. The next episode of whatever's Netflix special is way more engaging. Trying to go in and woo your wife is way more engaging, or worse, woo some other person on the internet, right? All of that is more engaging. And so we have to understand, just because it's boring, just because I quote unquote don't want to be here, doesn't mean it's the wrong thing. And in fact, it often means it's the exact right place I need to be.
But we don't have a culture of mentorship anymore.
That's exactly right.
I'm glad that you actually brought up the martial arts thing earlier, because I used to train martial arts myself, and eventually I used to teach martial arts. So I have a 3rd degree black belt. I ran a dojo for a bit, just on a community basis. And I remember when I was, going up to my brown belt, it was Aikido Jiu-Jitsu was the art. It was so cool. It was so fun. I could do all the rolls. I could do all the throws, eat swords and sticks. It was awesome. And I got my black belt, and they said, now you can start teaching. And it went womp womp.
That's right.
And then, you end up with like the white belts and the yellow belts, and you're just sitting there and just like, just punch him in the face. Just do it. Why is it so hard?
And they're giggling off in the corner and rolling around. Yeah,
exactly. It's just like, guys, like, why is it so difficult? And that ability to go through different levels and to transfer and to guide people by going backwards through your own narrative and repeating the same journey multiple times. There's tremendous wisdom there, but there's also tremendous humility. Right. We lack humility as fathers nowadays, and I'm talking about that about myself when it comes to, but also many other people. We lack the humility to understand that things take time, and it's not about us. It's often it has to be about somebody else, right? And we're talking about conflict.
When you have a kid, it's all about somebody else. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah, as I said it, I'm wrong. I'm wrong on that. Yeah, I'm wrong on that. As I said, here's what I mean. It means, going back to what we said originally, is it's not about defending my ego. It's about I'm raising a young man. I'm raising a young woman, right? And so it's not all about them. They can't be about that, but they need to see what work looks like. So it's not all about them. They can't be the epicenter of our world. I think we bury kids under that weight these days. But I do need to know that I enter into a life of service when I bring a child into the world.
And you have to, right? Yeah. And in that service, there is a lot of bliss.
Yeah.
Now, again, we were talking about conflict at the beginning of this. A lot of conflict comes from us forgetting our part to play, that we are here to serve. And that removes a lot of right to have conflict and ego and to have confrontation. Because often confrontation in men specifically comes from a thinking of the right from thinking that we have a right to deserve something. You owe me, I provide, you will. And it's very easy to dominate children. It's also not that hard to try to dominate a woman. We're intimidating creatures. We're stronger than them. We're very aggressive. We have the biology for it. Humans are a violent species, period. It's very easy to come in and start rolling in from the power trip side. And it's very hard to revert back and remember your own place. What are some strategies you recommend to men specifically and fathers when they get angry at their kids? Because we all do. When they get angry at the wives or their girlfriends or partners or whatever, because we all do. How do you find that peace so you don't have to get into that argument?
Well, I think I think you have to depathologize anger. Anger is simply an arrow pointing to something you care about. Anger is simply an arrow pointing towards something that ideally should be another way, and it's not. After that, I've got a behavior. Right, I have a behavior. I have a series of actions that I'm in control of, and so if I find that it's decoupling let me say it this way, in a simple way. My daughter doesn't have the power to make me mad.
At least she shouldn't.
She's 8, and in the moments that I do find myself mad, that's on me because she's 8. As a society, we don't let her vote. We don't let her drive or buy beer. Why? Because she's 8. How in the world can she unregulate a 40-something-year-old man? It's when I outsource that to her and say, I need you as an 8-year-old to prop up my esteem. You prop me up. I need you to perform. I need you to get this grade, not because I am trying to teach you how to work and to do hard things, but you're my walking report card on how good I'm doing. That's not fair to her. She can't carry that. Or dumping her into endless amounts of some sports practice and spending jillions of dollars. That's not her job, right? And so I want all men, when you feel that thing, own it. If you try to run from it or squash it, I think it erupts. And then it's my job when I'm angered, when I'm out, I have to know there's not a lot of learning going to happen there. Mm-hmm. I have to get way upstream and say, okay, what was it about? What was it about my 14-year-old son that he's 14, he's going to high school, I feel powerless now. That's what I'm actually angry about.
Well, and that's it right there. Anger is never a primary emotion. It's always a secondary emotion. And there's three feelings that can lead into it.
Okay.
It's fear, it's hurt, or it's sadness. And when you have one of those three, but then you believe no one's going to take them seriously, then we move into anger to make someone take it seriously. That's where the anger comes in. So I do the same thing with my son. Hey, why am I angry at my son? Well, he's 7. Okay, but what did I feel first? This feeling. Well, then why am I angry? Well, it's because he didn't take my feeling seriously. Does he even know that I have that feeling?
Right?
He's 7. Does he even know I'm having that feeling? Well, you know what? Maybe this is, and then I turn it into this. Maybe this is a chance. Hey, you know what? This thing is upsetting me. And it's not your problem, but let me explain my feeling to you. Why don't we kind of work through this together? Do you ever feel this way? Yeah, I do. Cool. Why don't we try to take care of this? Hey, let's handle this. So he can see what I'm having as a feeling and how a man should navigate it. And then when he has that feeling, I can say, hey, remember when I had that feeling? Yeah, let's do that with you. And I guide him through having those feelings. The anger's gone at that point. Now it's 2 men working on a problem.
Well, and I've shifted my language in my house to where I'll never say to my kids, you're really making me mad.
Yeah.
You're making me angry. I want them to know you don't have that kind of power in my house. I will say, I'm choosing frustration right now. I'm choosing anger right now. Because I've asked you 9 times to do a thing, and you're just, bleh. I am choosing frustration. And because we've gone over, we have the Delony values that we used to have on the wall. We got to redo them because my daughter's old enough to redo them now. But this is who we are. We honor each other. And you're choosing dishonor, which means you're opting out. And we need you here. You're a part of this family. That's different than saying, get out. There's a line that when you cross it, your dad cuts off relationship with you. I can't give that to my young son. He needs to know that there's not you don't have the kind of power to disconnect me from my love to you. You can turn and walk. You can turn and opt out. And so I want that. I want him to own that, right? But that comes back to me having that, it's cliche now, but it's that mindfulness. It's that, as I feel it, before that guy cuts me off, before that middle finger flies up, it's me exhaling and realizing I get to make up a story about that guy. I get to make up a story about he's doing drugs, just listening to stupid house music in his little Kia. He's cut me. That can be the story. Or I can make up another story, which is, dear God, help him get to the hospital before his wife dies. He's only got a few minutes. I get to make up whatever story I want about that guy. One of those is going to give me a stroke, and one of those is going to give me peace. And I'm going to choose peace. And that's mindfulness. That's spreading it out. So I think answering the anger question is almost every time for me personally, it's grief, it's sadness. I asked my 14-year-old to do something, and then I realized, he's just 14. He's in high school. My wife got home from spring break. She took them on a trip because I was working, and she walked in the door, and we were talking, and she goes, 4. I was like, what's that? And she goes, you got 4. Because I worked all the way through spring break. And I said, 4 what? She goes, you got 4 more spring breaks and he's gone. And I was like, oh, man, that hurts, right? That hurts. It was like, oh, man. But that's grief. That's sadness. That's not anger. He's 14, right?
How do you process sadness as a man so it doesn't turn into anger?
Beer. I'm just kidding.
Long walks in the woods and beer and an axe with a tree.
Right.
Oh, sadness is, it's not even something that we necessarily have to fight. If you have sadness, it's because, well, number one, it's a form of pain. Mm-hmm. It's a form of pain, but it tells you maybe you've lost something or you're going to lose something.
But that means you're human. That means you care, right?
That means you care.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, okay, well, what would you like to do about it? Is there anything that you can still hold on to? Or is there something else that you should invest into? You had an experience here. Yeah. Where else are you going to put that, right? What can you do next?
Let me challenge you on this. I'm kind of curious. Okay, so it's all nice that you can have, the time to process emotions. What if you don't? So I'll give you an example. I'm a single dad, right? So I spent a lot of time bringing Ellie up alone and, didn't really have anybody in the house. I do now, and it's a huge change. It's completely melting my brain. The fact that you can go to the bathroom and not freak out.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be like, what are you doing right now?
Oh, man, I remember the first time I had to go to the bathroom and my wife had left her newborn.
Yeah. And you're like,
I was like, oh, I guess you just watch. Like, right, I carry the whole thing, like the little carrier. Yeah. So yeah, I totally.
It's really awkward.
Yeah, super awkward.
Yeah, but when you don't have the luxury of having backup, right? First of all, let's admit that men are not good at being nice, caring, kind, and everything, while also processing emotions. I can only do one thing at a time. And I told my daughter that, I'm sorry, I'm a man. You're going to have to live with this. I will try my best, but I can only do one thing at a time and do it well. So if you are angry or you're upset or, well, actually hurt, scared, or sad, that's the three primary emotions. If you're any of those three, how do you process that while still being present with your kid, while still providing care for them? What's the proper way?
I think that one of the things as men we've robbed, especially our sons, but our daughters too, we've robbed them of saying those emotions out loud. We feel like we have to bury it and be stoic. And what we rob our sons of, especially, but also our daughters of, is the idea that dad's never sad, right? What they need to know is dad's sad, and then watch what he does next. That's the training, right? It's as a black belt instructor, if you just buzz through an arm bar, a whole room full of yellow belts, right? You haven't taught them.
They're going to break an arm.
Right.
That's what's going to happen, is they're going to break somebody's arm.
They have to know that when they move their elbow this way, your hip automatically goes the other way,
Yep.
right? Okay, now I'm seeing it. And so when I get mad or when I get sad, I will verbalize those out loud. And any man can do that. And when you name it and you put it out into the universe, most men, their bodies, it's a vulnerable state. It's a retreat, right? But I will tell my daughter, I'm feeling myself starting to get frustrated. Give me 1 second. And then she's going to watch. What is dad going to do next? Is dad going to hit stuff? Is he going to rant and rave? Is he going to blame an 8-year-old? Or is he then going to remain composed and then come in and say, here's what we're about to do?
And that's it right there. Kids throughout all of human history, they've been in close contact with us, right? They live in a one-room shack with us, or, hut or a cave or whatever, and they would see us live. And that's one thing that young people today don't have, for example, is not seeing their parents disagree.
Oh, yeah.
And debate, and then how to reason through that and navigate that. So as fathers, no, we don't collapse into feelings in front of our kids. If you're going to do that, you may need to excuse yourself to another room. But to have that experience with your child and say, I'm feeling this, here's what I'm going to do about it. They're fascinated, right? They pull out the popcorn and they start eating and watching, but it's perfectly okay to process some of those feelings in front of even and have that conversation. Again, not collapse into. That's a whole private separate thing, but to process it with those kids in front of them, by all means, you have to.
It helps them a lot.
Well, it's a gift. I do a ton of public speaking, and when my kids were younger, I would like them to come when they could. And I remember I was in a room. It was a small stadium. It was 5,000 plus people, and I was going up in 10 minutes, and then there's a clock, and it's 8 minutes. And my son was young, and I said, "You see all these people?" And he was wide-eyed. And I took his hand and I put it inside my shirt on my chest, and my heart was going, and I said, "Your dad's real nervous." And I wanted him to feel that and then watch his dad go up there and do his job. Because my son, when he gets called to his little theater production in middle school, or when he gets called to make a speech in class, his heart's going to go real fast, and he's going to go, "Oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not broken. My dad's not a superhero. My dad feels," and then goes and does the next right thing. And I feel like that is way more a gift than just seeing dad go up on stage and flex and not know the path, right? Not know the journey there.
I had a moment where about 4 months ago, where I felt like I'd failed my son for a moment, because he was talking to his little sister and they were saying something. I was just kind of half listening, and out of the corner of my ear, I heard him say, "No, dad's never afraid of anything." And I went, whoa, wait a minute. I've actually portrayed the wrong thing here. And I stopped them both and I said, "Yeah, I am. There's definitely things that make me scared in this world." And their eyes are this big. And I said, "But you know what? I have to face those things anyway." I said, sometimes you're afraid of things and it's not right. You shouldn't be afraid. But sometimes you're afraid and there are dangerous things too, and you have to be smart about them. So when you're afraid, that's when courage really matters. And my son was like, he got all big and puffed up. He's like, "I'm going to be brave." And I was like, well, great. That's fantastic. But you need to learn that right now. So don't ever think that I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
So it's very important for kids to be able to see conflict get resolved. So we actually tend to hide conflict as part of a human emotion from our children. This is a major issue for actually kids who grow up with families and they go into teenage years and then their parents get divorced and the kids are blindsided because they go, we never knew. What happened? How can you have a breakage of love to this extent? And it can be very damaging to them. It'll take a while to recover. There's an interesting incident, and I really paid attention to it a couple of years back. I had a nanny, the nanny and Ellie had an argument, and then we had to process what happened, disaggregate it. And then the nanny wanted to, speak in private and whatnot. And then Ellie walked in and she was like, oh, can I listen in? And I said, you know what? Yes. Let's talk about this together. We're, a little bit both aggravated. We're going to talk through this and figure this out. And you can watch. And what she did, she put a little chair, she put it right between us. She sat on it. She listened for about a minute. Then she picked up a blanket and a book, and she just sat there and looked up. She was talking, watching us talk things through, and she was sensing how we were able to navigate emotions. And afterwards, I asked her, what was so interesting to you about this? And she said, well, I want to know how to be not angry when I am. Right? And not angry when I am is quite an interesting thing, right? Because it is not really a denial of how to not be angry, but how to be not angry when you become something, right? It's the creation of an opposite. So we do have to teach our kids about conflict, and we need to teach them by example, which is one thing that I love. And this is really an important message that you have, John, is the ability to really teach. Conflict is resolved not by not being something, but by teaching somebody how to create an alternative reality, a story, right? So how do you, let's go into a little bit of science of attachment. What happens when you have a conflict? What happens when you have an argument with your daughter, with your son, with your wife, with your husband, whatever, biochemically, and what happens when you actually are able to create a resolution?
Oh, it's huge. So when we get stressed out, right, cortisol dumps into the system. And we form, if we don't successfully navigate it, we form a cortisol association with that person.
What about adrenaline? Because usually, you get angry as a man, you spike in that
cortisol and
stuff.
adrenaline. Yeah,
Adrenaline, it floods. It floods. But this is why if couples, for example, don't resolve conflicts, they start forming that association with each other, and their brains won't like each other, even if their hearts love each other. Your brain will say, nope, get away from that person. So if you resolve a conflict, you dump with cortisol, you dump with adrenaline, everything floods through your system. But if you can navigate it successfully, if you can talk through that conversation and you find that the other person cares about you, you start to release a little bit of oxytocin. If you really navigate that stress and bring it down, you start to release vasopressin, which is that bonding hormone, right? This person is my ally. They take me seriously, right? My anger goes down because now I have no reason to be angry because they took me seriously. It goes away. Then serotonin starts flooding through your system. We keep bringing that up, but it's such an integral part of this. But as you resolve the cortisol together, your brain actually in the future says, that person helps me resolve cortisol. So whenever I get stressed out, I'll just go to this person and they'll help me.
It's a safety thing. The thing you're talking about is building the anchor of safety through continual experiences.
Well, I'm hearing you describe this, it sounds a lot like having a teammate back in the gym who's preparing for a fight. And man, a month out, we'd get after it. We'd really I heard somebody say it once, we didn't want to hurt each other, but we wanted to put a hurting on each other, right?
Yep.
And you'd wear each other out for round after round, and then the final bell goes, everybody hugs, everybody collapses on the floor, everybody's like, dude, where are we going to eat? But here's why. We both knew we were engaging in this conflict, iron sharpening iron, for this unified goal. Mm-hmm. We're all on a team, and we want this guy to win. And so when my wife and I keep that front and center, and dude, I'm terrible at it, but I like the idea of it. When we keep the front and center, the epicenter is we're building an amazing marriage that our kids and our community and members of our church can anchor into. Then these conflicts are just iron sharpening iron. It is, who are we becoming? What are we doing? Where are we going? And it's making this entity, right? 1 + 1 = 1. We're making this entity something it wasn't before. And that means then conflict becomes a way to achieve something. It's never me versus you.
And that The research is so clear on this, and it's fascinating. That right there is how you bring passion back into a marriage. That's how you have 20 honeymoon periods through the course of your relationship. That is the female Viagra everybody's always looking for. It's not it's the spice of the bedroom, but it's also fundamentally how you maintain a marriage for 50 years is by having a purpose. So many men come to my coaching, they say, Adam, like, what are we doing in our marriage? I don't really know. I think thinking about having an affair. My wife is angry at me. And I say, well, what's the point of your marriage? And they go, what do you mean? What's the point? Like, what are you achieving together? We should be achieving something together. Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Like that. Yeah. You're building towards something. So every time you succeed, every time you take a step, you can high five, right? And say, we did it. Yeah. And that floods you with vasopressin, and then it renews the honeymoon bond. And then it makes you love each other, but it also makes you trust each other.
I remember I was giving a talk on loneliness and love, and it hit me. I was backstage. I texted a buddy who was just rolling off multi-year term as a Navy SEAL. And I texted him and said, do you guys love each other? And his text back was so instructive. He said, it's a unique and powerful love, known by few people. And it was this idea that, like, you have trained your entire life so that I don't die. And I've trained my entire life so you don't die. And any one of us, without thinking, it's become automated. We'll jump on whatever grenade falls in front. So it's us, not y'all. And I just
well, that gives me shivers.
Blown away.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And then I go home to my wife and I'm like, are you serious? We didn't, right? It's like, what are we doing? Infinitely more important. And I think that's where the red pill conversation gets everything wrong. I think we think leadership, I think we think, submission and those kind of things is about, I'm at the top of this pyramid, which puts me above you at the base of this pyramid. That's not how leadership works. Leadership is, I'm going to tunnel under this pyramid and the whole thing's going to rest on me. And so when I take the role as a leader, I am saying for all the people under my care, every day of my life will be about clearing your path so that we can accomplish this thing. Every day of my life will be, if someone's got to die, I'm going to go first. I'm going to hold this thing up, not climb to the top and bark orders. And I think if more of the red pill guys would spend their energy not trying to crawl up to the top, but get underneath this thing, once that weight sat on you, you would realize this is what purpose feels like. This is what masculinity and love and strength and power feels like.
And I love that. And let's disaggregate that, because the bottom of the pyramid is the source of their fear, their anxiety, right? That is their experiences. That is their trauma. That's the thing that happened to them. Like, people don't become red pill for no good reason. I actually understand why they choose that. And at the very beginnings of their recovery, it is a very helpful way for them to organize themselves, because it gives them power, responsibility, confidence. They organize their fitness, their health, their financials, all fantastic things. Like, there are a lot of benefits to doing some aspects of red pill, except for that idea of leadership.
It goes to the for what, right?
Right, exactly.
The habits are great. It's the for what.
So yes, you know what, 100%, climb up the pyramid enough to get yourself in order, to get your sovereignty back, to understand what you actually are about. But then realize you have to trek back down. The down is the way up, right? And you have to go back down with your newfound power and knowledge and expertise and tackle the things you could not have done before. Why are you angry? Why are you scared? A woman, because you are scared that a woman is going to come in and destroy your life, and you now have to protect against that. Why do you think that you must give, why must you think you must be in transactional relationships, that you must only give as much to a woman as she is giving to you? Tackle those questions. Understand, and this is something I've said in other podcasts and got me a lot of flack, and people said, what advice would you give to somebody with a red pill friend? I'm like, slap them and ask them who have they hurt and why they've done that. Right? And it's not an offensive thing to say, I have hurt people in life. It is just what it is. It's part of our human experience. But eventually you're going to have to come back and understand why, so you can stop hurting people and stop hurting yourself. That's the foundation of peace.
There's a great book, I think it's by David Brooks, called The Second Mountain. And essentially the idea is you spend the first half of your life trying to get to the top of whatever mountain. Law school, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to be get to the big firm. I'm going to make partner. I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the chief resident, whatever the thing is. And it's when you get to the top of whatever mountain you think it was that you can then see, oh no, my purpose is over there. And the challenge is you got to climb back down.
Yeah. The going down part is hard.
You can't just jump to the other one. You got to go back down. And that's tough, right?
It is.
I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to start taking care of myself. I'm going to become a person that's worthy of somebody, a romantic partner saying, you know what, I'm going to bet my life on you. That's a huge bet that I asked my wife to make. And so I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to be able to provide for a living. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to, like we talked about earlier, I'm going to have to learn. It's a new era. I'm going to have to learn a new set of skills that maybe I didn't have. Maybe my dad, as a SWAT hostage negotiator for a Texas police department, didn't learn growing up. Yeah.
Wow.
He was an amazing man and a homicide detective. He's a great guy, but he still is. He's still alive. But he wasn't, like, part of his repertoire wasn't, all right, here's how to connect feelings with your children. That was a different game. Mm-hmm. Now, part of my role is to sit down and learn how to process with my daughter, with my son, and then say, and what are we going to do next? Right? That's all of a part of it. But good grief, for what? For what? Right? So I can get someone to do what I say, or so I can hedge against the fact they may leave me? No, man, then you will never be connected.
There is for sure a trust and vulnerability and making a decision to go in and say this is committed. Personal question, you'd have to answer. But do you have a prenup with your wife?
Do not.
So this man advocates for prenups. Okay. And I have a problem with that.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Teach me about it. Let's fight.
So the word prenup is so weird in our culture, right? The prenuptial agreement, which really is a marriage contract. I think that couples need to be sitting down and discussing the realities of marriage, not only the bad parts of like splitting up, but also how will we resolve conflicts? What are the 15 steps before we get divorced? What are all the agreements we're going to lay out for that? How will we treat each other? What will be the division of labor, perhaps, or what are we looking at? Some parts can be legal, some parts can be more emotional, right? You have a lawyer check it all over, so it binds, but building a contract together of what marriage is going to look like on both sides, I think, is absolutely crucial.
I like the idea of what you're saying about the intentionality part. I don't think many couples, and actually I think it's kind of probably good that they don't count the cost, right? I think there's something to be said for till death do us part, let's go make this happen. And then 3 years in, you're like, oh, we made a big commitment, right? This is going to be harder than we thought. I think there's something important about that. What I don't like is, or my challenge would be, it's the or else. Mm-hmm. And I think if I give myself an or else, I consider it as I have a pathological addiction to candy. Bad news. If I keep one emergency bag, I will eat that bag. Period. And I've talked to the experts of the experts about habits and this and self-control. At this point in my life, I need to not have that. And so I know there's been steps along the way. There's been multiple times when my wife, several that I can count, we've sat across the table and have said, the marriage as we have known it is over. Are we going to continue here? And I don't believe in the sentence, it just ran out of steam or it just ran its course. One or both of us quit, right? And we know we can't continue to be married as we were. Are you still in? And if there was an off-ramp, I can't say with certainty that I wouldn't have taken the off-ramp. And so knowing, the disaster that will be what comes next, let's try to figure this out. And that doesn't sound sexy, and that doesn't sound Hollywood, and that doesn't sound overly romantic, but it was just the fact that we had built walls, and it was going to be a pain to get over those walls.
So we're scared of the dark. We're scared of the unknown more than we are scared of the known, right? That is the thing that literally is the terror in our lives. And I would rather have that terror work for me than against me, right? I would rather say that I would not want to even think about the terror that's going to come from a divorce. Right, I haven't already gone through one. I can tell you, like, that actually is a huge hesitation to me to even have a prenup. I don't want to have to even talk about the next stage if, we have to do this again. I would rather leave it undisclosed. Yes, I understand the financial risk. Yes, I understand all the thing that comes. No, I do not think that a prenup is really going to protect you fully in court. I'm no lawyer. However, I've never seen one work 100%. They always get disassembled. But the harm in going in and telling to your wife that I'm already thinking of a way out and that I already planned it out and I have a plan and this is what's going to happen, that to me is weird. I don't want that power.
Weird is one thing, but I think the courage to have those conversations and explore what the other person does during that conversation is very instructive. And I'm not advocating for building an easy way out. I think it should be atrocious. I think that the way out through that prenuptial...
You will be flogged.
Yeah, no, I think it should be catastrophically bad so that you can see it and go, well, you know...
Let's don't do that.
Yeah, you're sitting across the table for each other. Are you in or out? And then you look at the contract and you're like, oh, no, I better be in. Like, I'm going to lose 4 fingers and, like, you know, all these things. But I think that there's 2 pieces, unfortunately. Our society, we have no-fault divorce, which I think is...
Catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Catastrophic. Yeah. And number 2 is if you don't build this marriage contract, then the state already has a marriage contract for you. Right. You already have a divorce contract. You already have a divorce agreement. You're just going to have to be really nasty in court about it.
That's why I always advocate. People are like, let's just don't get married. We'll just move in together long term. We'll just do that. Is at least when you make your marriage official with the state, there is a built-in. It becomes a business transaction if you do split. If you don't, it's a mess. The only time I would advocate for a prenup is if someone is getting remarried or someone is coming from a massive disparity and economically, right? And only because not for you two, but for the cousins and the kids that will come out of the woods, right? And so we're going to insulate.
It's a protective thing. Right. That is a protective thing because...
But that's a rare moment.
Yeah, especially in that circumstance, people can be influenced and they can be influenced by very bad actors. And sometimes it is truly, I agree, a protective measure.
A strange cousin can trip at your house and suddenly... Right, so but that's about the money part. But I'll have to ponder that.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think the prenup, number 1, because women always get on me for saying I'm for prenups, it needs to protect both sides in the event of, X, Y, or Z. But it also needs to be so clearly horrifying. If either one of you initiates divorce proceedings, it's worse than the state would do, right? And I think that it's an interesting way.
That's an interesting thought for sure.
Right. And actually, I advocate for it specifically because of no-fault divorce, because I think it's so easy to initiate no-fault divorce now that I think a prenup should stop people from initiating divorce more than anything. It's not for when you get divorced; it's to stop it, right?
I like that. And let's now take a little bit of an in-between step. So we went from everything from holding hands to how to not fight to prenups
it's
and
been
divorce.
A great conversation.
Yeah. It was fantastic. And now let's actually leave our viewers with a little bit of a kind of a more of a practical guide, on how to avoid this range of terrible things happening. So we've talked about physical touch, the importance of physical touch. We talked about the importance for men to manifest, explain, and demonstrate how they resolve their feelings. Now, that's going to be a very uncomfortable batch of things. We talked about leadership. We talked about trust. We talked about having to go down to the bottom of you yourself being a danger to your family. What other things have we missed potentially in terms of how to prevent conflict, how to use conflict to build as opposed to destroy?
So I've got 2 that I'll just throw out here, and y'all may have heard me. I throw them out everywhere. They are 2 of the principles that I believe saved my marriage, and not only saved it, but strengthened it to where it's unbreakable. One is from the great William Glasser, and some of his stuff hasn't aged well, but he was a psychiatrist that essentially swore off psychiatry and came up with this thing called choice theory. But here was he used to, and again, I never met him, but through his writings, it appeared that he kind of rolled his eyes at marriage therapy. And he would say, I can fix most couples in 2 sessions. That's all we need. And me being like the eternal skeptic, I was like, okay. And here's what he said. He said, people think in pictures, but you speak in words. And he said, all you have to do is align the pictures and you'll get the answer you need. And so as I dug in, here's the analogy that I always give. My wife walks in on a Monday and she gets really close to me. And she says, this Friday will be the hottest date of your life. And she smiles seductively and walks away. Man, right? All day I'm thinking about like how quick can we get to Friday. By Monday I'm like, oh my gosh, where are we going to go? What does she have in mind? By Tuesday I'm like, what am I going to be wearing and for how long? And by the time Thursday night I'm like,
you're doing crunches.
Where's the hell? Yeah, I fast all week. Like, where's the helicopter going to land and who's going to take the kids? Oh, the kids, who cares about the kids? They'll be fine. Friday comes, I get off of work, I race home. I shower again twice in a day. That should tell you something. I shower again. I come out in a suit, I'm dressed to the nine. And my wife's wearing running shorts and a t-shirt. And she's like, what are you doing? And I look at her and say, what are you doing? She said, I told you we're going on a date. And I was like, yeah, you said it's the hottest date of my life. And she's like, John, it is Friday. Taco Barn has 7 tacos for $4. And she goes, by the way, I'm getting 2 orders, and you probably don't want to sleep in another room because the gas is going to be amazing. And I get super mad. And then she gets mad that I'm mad. And here's the deal. I love tacos. I love when we throw on shorts and T-shirts and we just go eat tacos and we laugh and we have a good time. We talk about the future or whatever. I also think that she loves romantic rendezvous, right? That someone has taken a lot of time and planned them out. It was simply, we used the word date. And I had this picture and she had this picture, and now I'm into resentment. And then I'm starting to tell myself stories about she always does this and she never means this. And so that's an extravagant example, but something as simple as, hey, John, I need some time tonight. And in my head, my wife she's an author and a coach, but she also takes the lion's share of the domestic stuff. So in my head, I'm like, okay, when dinner's over and the kids are in bed and X, Y, and Z, then I won't bother her. I'm not going to hassle her. And in her mind, John, the moment you walk in that door, I'm walking out the door. I'm going to go to dinner by myself tonight. I just need some time. And so I walk in, she comes flying by me, and now all the old attachment triggers start looping. And so one of the most instructive, important things that ever happened in my marriage 6 or 7 years ago, and it has changed everything, is on a daily basis, we ask the question, what's your picture of going to your in-laws for Christmas look like? What does your picture of tonight look like? What's your picture of this baseball game that we're taking our kid to? You want me taking care of Josephine? Do you want me walking around? What's your picture of this look like? And she says, well, my picture's this. Easy. I can do that. That's fantastic. Most of the conflict is in talking past each other. The second big one is that I got from Dr. Brene Brown is the story she tells is her husband was opening the refrigerator door one evening, and in the glow, she said, hey, don't forget, my mom's coming over for dinner tomorrow night. And he shuts the door and goes, are you kidding me? And she said she immediately spun out instantly. Your mother's been staying with us for months and this, and my mother can't come over for one night, whatever. And when she finished, of course I'm paraphrasing the story, but when she finished, her husband looked at her and said, your mother's one of my favorite people in the world. I had that stupid dinner with all those medical doctors tomorrow night. I wanted to have dinner with your mom. And so in their marriage, and then now in my marriage, quickly the conversation, when we do find ourselves in conflict, it almost always begins with, the story I'm choosing to make up is not, you made that dinner just because you think I'm getting fat, and you made that dinner because you're trying to cut my carbs out. The story I'm choosing to make up is, you don't think I'm attractive anymore. And then she goes, no, man, like, I've actually been having rocket diarrhea and I just need some plain potatoes tonight. That's right. I mean, it allows the, oh no, I wasn't even thinking of you at all. This is all right. But we instantly make all these stories about ourselves. And so in my house, when I find myself upset, when I find myself frustrated, the story I'm choosing to make up about this is, for the last 7 nights you've had something going on. I'm choosing to tell myself a story that you're trying to avoid me. That is different than you never want to hook up anymore, right? And those two tactics have transformed my home. And now it's allowing us to always be together as we try to solve these future things.
That's awesome. I want to add one. As a man, you must absolutely have the ability to laugh at yourself.
Yes.
Right? And this is so key, and it has saved me so many fights with my daughter. I envision it saving me so many fights in my future marriage. And that is to say, look, if you freaked out And you say, I was thinking this story, and they tell you, no, you're not. I'm like, yeah, that's hilarious. It's so funny.
Right.
If you do something that's just, ridiculous, call it out. Laugh at yourself, laugh at your partner, laugh at your kids. The fact that you can demonstrate this is not a big deal. Most of these things are not big deals. I've seen some things that are truly big deals, but they're very rare. Like crises happen. Sure, people get sick, people die, like emergencies happen, but most things are not emergencies. Yeah. You can choose to make a catastrophe out of anything. But the majority of the things is that two people who love each other couldn't communicate, freaked out, and they want to be simply reassured that they love each other again. Right. And that is the funny part, is that we think that such a huge thing is possible, when in reality, all it is just about two creatures looking for connection. So the more humor you can add to yourself, you can finish 99% of arguments with a joke.
Or the four most important words in the English language. I changed my mind. Or the other three, I was wrong.
Ooh,
right?
That's out of...
Right?
It's a hard one.
But here's the thing. I want my family to hold our values. They're etched in concrete. This is who we are. I want my beliefs to change all the time. That's why I listen to new podcasts. That's why I read books. So I learn new things and think, I believed this, and now I've got new information. Now I believe that. And when I model that for my kids by saying, son, get off that screen. You're just wasting your head. You're rotting your brain. And he turns and looks at me and says, I was just writing a note to Grandma just to tell her I love her. Sorry, Dad, I'll hurry. I got a choice now. I can say, hurry up and shut that screen off. Or I can say, hey, look at me. Dude, I was wrong.
Oops.
Yeah, I was wrong. Go ahead and knock that letter out. She's lucky to have you as a grandkid. And then we're on about our day. My son gets a modeling of a dad trying to be overprotective, a dad learning new data, and a dad going, I'm sorry. Yeah. Right? What a gift.
I love that. I use the word oops a lot in my household.
Yeah.
Oops, I did not mean that. That's silly.
Well, and I think beyond oops, I think oops can almost be let's just pretend that didn't happen. I like calling it out. I was wrong.
Well, oops has to come with an explanation.
That's
right?
Right.
There has to be a narrative after the oops. But the oops is a great opener because it's a little bit of like, oh, well, that's silly, but also funny, but also sorry. Yeah. So let's build on that. It's a good opener. Adam, what do you have to add?
I'll add one more thing. And from all my years of being a marriage therapist, there was one thing I learned that was really awful about couples, is that most couples have this idea that if they ever ask the other person how that person feels about their relationship, that the other person's going to go, I haven't thought about it, but it's horrible and I hate it. Let's get a divorce right now. People have this idea that only ignorance and silence is holding their relationship together, even good ones.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, don't ever ask and don't ever tell. So I have made a point, not only with my wife, but with my kids and friends and everybody. I've asked, hey, just so I know, how are you feeling in our relationship? And people go, and they get scared and they're weirded out. And they're like, okay. And I say, no, I mean, really, how are you feeling in it? What's it like? Is it good? Is there anything I can change? Anything that you would change that you'd like to? And they look at you like you're going to bite their head off, and they really really analyze you. And then they'll tell you something, like a little change they want to make. And you're like, great. Yeah, I can do that. Hell yeah. Hey, can I ask you this thing? Would you be able to change this thing? And they're like, yeah. And you know what's funny? If you do that every week with your wife for the rest of your life, you have a perfect marriage. You catch problems when they're tiny. She feels like you care about her. She loves you to death, and she always feels heard. Yeah. And if guys would just implement that tiny little change in their marriage from now on, you will be having more sex than you know what to do with. No,
well, I tell folks all the time, the two biggest aphrodisiacs in the American household are a weekly 20 to 30 minute budget meeting and calendar meeting. Here's what's coming up this week. Because it's the old trope, you can tell what somebody values by looking at their bank account and their calendar. Are we on the same page? How are we going to spend money this week? And money is tied to safety. Money is tied to alignment and calendar. Who's driving who to school this morning or that morning? Or are you going to be coming home late these nights? Because I'm beginning to plan the week for this and this. Those two things. But it's the kind of like going back to the Waffle House with my son. It's just a choice to look at somebody and say, I value you at least 30 minutes a week. Right.
Mangoes are also nice for that, I heard.
What is that?
Mangoes, I heard.
I love
aphrodisiacs.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
I love mangoes.
That's what the story in the street is.
I'll give them a shot. That's awesome.
There you go.
No.
Man, guys, that was a fantastic conversation. John, where can we find you? Where can people work with you?
Only after you listen to this podcast. I have a podcast, YouTube show called the Dr. John Delony Show, and it's a call-in. So people call in from all over the world, and real people going through real challenges, and we just try to figure out what's the next. You can't solve anything in 9 minutes or 10 minutes, but you can peel back the scab real quick, and you can put people in the next right move. And then I'm all over the internet. So you can buy my books everywhere.
That's amazing. Thank you, John. What a fantastic guest you are. Please come back.
Anytime. Thank you all for your hospitality. And thank you for a lovely dinner. It's fantastic.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
This was a very good serotonin bonding dinner.
Yeah, very good serotonin and very good serotonin episode.
There you go. Adam, where do we find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith. You can find me on adamlanesmith.com for coaching, for help, for marriage assistance, for funny advice and cool dad jokes all over the internet. I'm at Attachment Adam on Instagram and YouTube, and you can find me right here on this podcast.
Amazing. And I'm at Andrey Korikov on Instagram. So that's linked below. If you guys want to learn more about our Academy for Content Creators, which is sponsoring this podcast, that is veritascreative.media. And thank you for Rugged Legacy Grooming Supply also for sponsoring this episode. We'll be talking about them a lot over the next while. And in the meantime, thank you guys both for coming on. And this is I Wish You Knew. Please hit the ringer button so you don't miss any new updates and episodes. Subscribe, comment, share, follow. We would love to hear your thoughts on how you guys manage fights and arguments and disagreements and how we can use them to turn them into something that's cohesive, productive, helpful, and strengthening to your relationship. So ask us questions, we'll respond, and we'll see you on the next episode of I Wish You Knew.